Some of this may not be new. I mean, these are possibly things that you do anyway when you're thinking about convening, a meeting, whether it's an in-person meeting or a meeting that's held online in a virtual space. So some of these might feel familiar to you, but the first thing we started thinking about was meeting norms, and meeting norms with respect to the virtual environment. And so we sort of landed on a few key categories of norms that we try to think about whenever we have a virtual meeting or a virtual gathering. So what are meeting norms? In general, they're best practices that we keep in mind for running a virtual meeting. We try to establish our meeting norms, our meeting structure, and the flow of the meeting ahead of time, and share those out with our participants so they know what to expect. So there are no surprises unless they're planned surprises. So thinking about meeting norms, design and share meeting norms with your meeting participants ahead of time. You can do that via email or an agenda, definitely prior to the meeting and at the beginning of the meeting, as Andi just shared a few norms with you. Sort of our housekeeping slide exists as our norms. So thinking about the key categories of norms, first, let folks know how to attend your meeting or gathering. Make sure they understand how to join the meeting. Like I did not understand how to join the meeting today, which is ironic. Either whether it's video or dial-in, let them know if there's a login and password or waiting room. You might ask them to change their screen name to their preferred first name and last initial, and perhaps include their organization or their preferred pronouns. It's kind of a virtual name tag. If video is required and participants are uncomfortable with using their personal background, you might provide an organization branded background image, something that they can use instead. And always remind folks to perhaps adjust their work setup so they have plenty of light, so they're not showing themselves in the dark. If we're using video, it's nice to see folks' faces. The second norm is also ironic. Prep the technology or platform so participants know what to expect. Don't presume participants are experienced with your tool or platform, even if they've been using it at home for Zoom chats with their family or in other environments. Let them know how you expect them to engage with the platform. You might provide a link to an FAQ or a short tutorial and ask folks to review this information prior to meeting. And always clarify any technical requirements in advance. Suggest using headphones, make sure they have access to a high-speed internet connection, just to make sure that participants are able to fully experience your virtual gathering. Help participants know what to expect from the experience. I think it's always good to provide an agenda slide so they know what's coming. If at all possible, provide breaks. Let them know there'll be at least a 5-minute break after an hour. Ask folks who leave the meeting during the break to turn off their video screen, maybe mute themselves. Invite folks to informally chat using the chat function or within your meeting itself during a break. That's always a nice opportunity to allow folks to reconnect in a virtual space. And you should always establish in advance whether video will be expected so folks can plan accordingly their space, their environment, whether they want to change their shirt, I mean, whatever floats their boat. I think it's always good to know what's coming. Accessibility is always part of our meeting norms. We try to ask participants in advance if they have any accessibility needs, just like we would in an in-person meeting. It's always good to make sure your meeting platform, the structure and the norms allow for everyone to fully participate. So it's good to dig into some of those service pieces of information within Zoom or GoToMeeting or Skype or whatever the platform is you're using. Make sure that you understand their accessibility functions. For example, Zoom actually offers closed captioning, transcripts, screen reader support, and some other accessibility features that are really interesting to explore. We always try to record when necessary and appropriate and share out our meeting recording. And likewise, it's good to know that within Zoom, you can actually create a text file out of the chat. So if you're doing meeting business within chat and you need a an official record, you can create that as a text file. I think there's some how-tos that we always like to make sure folks knew before or during the meeting. It's always good to review meeting participation norms at the beginning of the meeting, how folks can ask and answer questions, whether you want them to raise the hand icon or use chat or both, save their questions till the end, that sort of thing. Similar to what you would do within an in-person meeting. If you have meeting participants who'd like to have a side conversation, it's always nice to encourage them to use the chat function and just change to find that person they want to talk to. Some platforms don't allow you to have those one-to-one conversations. Those are settings that I think you can set at the beginning of your meeting or your webinar. So think about how you want folks to participate in your space and make sure you're setting up your platform to accommodate that. Just like Andi said, let folks know how to leave the meeting if they need to step away, turn their video off, mute themselves. Folks need to get up, get a drink of water, use the restroom, that's always fine. One thing that we've tried to incorporate into our online meetings and gatherings is to think about staff roles. Ideally, it would be great if every virtual meeting could have a leader, a note taker, somebody who can provide tech support for participants who may not know are having trouble connecting or hearing, or something's not working for them. And we have another staff role that we like to call a Yoda. Yoda, help you, I will. Who is somebody who is kind of watching the meeting, not taking notes, not leading a conversation, but making sure folks are participating, making sure their questions are being seen and answered, just making sure that everyone is having an opportunity to participate and engage, keeping an eye on the room. And then finally, we like to follow up with attendees either at the end of a meeting or afterwards with a short survey. Sometimes we build that into the virtual meeting using a tool like Poll Everywhere or some of the other polling apps, just to get a quick temperature check. How did this work for you? How could we have made this more engaging in a virtual environment? What ideas do you have? So on and so forth. I think it's great to get a little bit of feedback in the moment. So those are just some meeting norms that Andi and I and others within WiLS have kind of talked about and sort of honed and tried to incorporate into our own meetings this year. And as you probably have guessed, we are incorporating many of those into this experience today.
Thanks, Vicki. So it looks like the setting, just a bit back to the housekeeping, the setting for allowing everybody to mute and unmute is not working. So if you have a question or you want to speak, just raise your hand and we'll get to you, okay? Do the, not like in real life, on the Zoom, just click the raise hand button. And so now that we've talked a little bit kind of about the nuts and bolts of establishing meeting norms and how you expect people to participate and giving them all that lead in, I wanted to turn this over and talk a little bit about this metaphor that really works for Vicki and I as we talk about these things. And that is to imagine your virtual event or your meeting like a dinner party. You know, it's your responsibility to curate that experience for people when you invite them to your home, very much like it is your responsibility to make them feel as welcome at any sort of Zoom meeting or Google Hangout that you might be doing that's, you know, of significant need. So you would think about, you know, curating the guest list and all other things, but take one moment. I just want to use the chat again to think about this. So you're having a dinner party. What are some crucial things that you think about and you plan for, problems you try to pre-solve, things that are, you know, something you want to have, you know, prepared and planned. Just share that in chat and to kind of help us with this metaphor a bit. Enough.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Amount of food. Yep. If you have enough silverware and dishes, I fail this one a lot. Food allergies. enough chairs, beverage preferences, yes. So these are where to put coats, make sure food fits on the table so it's not crowded. Logistics, time and date. So that's the housekeeping stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where am I going to put all those people? What kind of music people like? So notice in these that it's less about like what you have to do, and all those things are more about making sure that your guests are comfortable, that they feel welcomed and appreciated, that they are, you know, that they have, you know, interactions with other guests that are meaningful, and all of that. So, you know, just as if you're working to create a dinner party, you're curating this experience. And I mean, often our work one is not so much about having friends and formal conversations, but it's an educational and a social experience at the same time. You've invited people to your space. So running a virtual meeting is very similar to the dinner party, that you want your guests to know what to expect. You want them to feel welcome. You want them to have a positive experience. And then you want them to be satisfied with the outcome. So when you have your next one, they're gonna want to come back to your house and have another dinner party. What if no one talks? Vicki, my nightmare.
It's my nightmare.
So I want to pull back the curtain a bit here. Why are we talking about this right now? Well, obviously, things are operating a little differently in a pandemic than we operated prior to it in the before times. In some of the promo we put out for this meeting, we use the phrase "new normal," and a member objected to it. You know, I 100% hear that. I also don't want this life to be the life we have going forward. But I think it has forced us to think about the way we've always done things a little differently. And we've discovered that maybe there are some good things about the way we're doing things now that we're going to carry forward. I think, you know, lots of businesses already are deciding, like, we don't need a physical space. We managed to get all of our work done virtually. Let's keep it that way. We can save some costs. You know, virtual gatherings are safe. So there's a million reasons why we might want to continue to do more virtual gathering. And we'll talk a little bit, we'll dig in a bit into some details about that. However, Zoom fatigue is real. It's neurological and it's science. We're sitting here, and if I had a video screen of all of y'all up on my screen right now, my brain and my eyes would be working so hard to read the cues from our interaction that would come very easily and very natural at an in-person meeting. I can't see your body language. I can't see you nodding or furrowing your brow if I'm saying something that's confusing. These really are taxing. And I think every one of us have had those days where, you know, you have back-to-back Zoom meetings all day long, and by the end of it, you're like, why am I so tired? All I did was sit there. And it's a real thing. So all the things we can do to make these sorts of moments more engaging, more special, then that's going to help us alleviate some of that fatigue. And then why is WiLS talking about it? So we've been virtual, as Vicki mentioned, since 2013. And I really don't think we ever dug in to think about a way to do this stuff wonderfully, right? To do it with like joy and delight, until pandemic times came along and we were all very forced to. We wanted to know if we're doing it the best we could. And a lot of our work at WiLS is about getting people together to complete projects, to solve problems. And we knew there was a better way to do that. So Vicki and I kind of worked on some of the research on this, and we wanted to be able to pull those gatherings together in a way that respected everybody's well-being and their time. And one of our core organizational values is about respecting the time of our members. If it's a boring hour-long meeting where nobody's paying attention and nothing is taken away, that is not how we respect your time. So, you know, it's very important to us that we do these and we do them well, and maybe, you know, pull back the curtain and turn it around and teach you all a little bit of what we've learned along that way.
Excuse me. Thanks, Andi. So before we get into the details of some of the tips and tricks and ideas that we want to share with you today, I also want to take a moment to just think about virtual meetings and how do we maximize those benefits. So take a moment and think about what are some of the positive aspects or some of the benefits to meeting virtually. And forget about the pandemic, forget about that whole situation. Think about what's positive about this experience and share your ideas in chat. That's very true. More comfy. Yes. No stressful commute, no travel time. I bet everybody has had that experience of trying to decide whether or not to drive to a meeting somewhere in Wisconsin in the middle of January, wondering if it was going to snow or that situation. Yoga pants with a suited jacket. That's great. Yeah, some may feel more empowered to contribute without having to speak, just in chat. That's great. Less time between meetings, no extra travel time. Yeah, truly statewide meetings are possible. Truly statewide meetings are possible. Usually there's a recording to view. The day is spent productively and focused. Easy to plan a time to meet. Yeah, those are all great. Those are all great reasons. I think a few, polling the group is easy. That's a few that have come to mind for us that you guys have mentioned, that you folks have mentioned. Accessibility, the ability to control the AV, no need to travel. It's certainly a cost savings. I think about the resources that you're saving traveling across the state to meetings. You no longer need to rent a room or pay a little extra for food or AV, or think about all the kind of secondary expenses when you're creating a gathering or a conference. There's time savings. Lots of folks have mentioned that. The amount of time you save, not having to travel between meetings, broadens the reach. We talked about that. More inviting to out-of-state folks as well as folks who maybe live further out in the state. Meetings are recordable and shareable. And like you said, I think of a couple of folks, virtual actually works better for some folks for whom meeting in person may be a barrier. There are folks who have social anxiety or just may not feel compelled to speak up in an in-person meeting. So yeah, those are all great. Cold, hot venues with no room control, no temp control, that's great. I think we have that battle here at my house though, so that actually doesn't work for me. We're constantly playing with the Nest. Fantastic. So let's take a look at the next slide, Andi. Next slide. Mm-hmm.
I advanced the slide.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. It's taking a little, I've got a little jet lag here on my machine. All right, so now that we've talked about all the benefits of virtual meetings and virtual gatherings, we want you to take a minute to think about what you're missing about in-person meetings. And in this moment, I truly want you to take a minute. I want you to either close your eyes, stand up, take a 7th inning stretch, have a quiet moment. We're going to give you a couple minutes. Stand up, walk around, go look out the window, pet your dog, whatever you need to do to activate your brain. It's 1:31. We'll come back at 1:33. And at that point, we're actually going to share some ideas in a Google Doc. So we will put the link to the Google Doc in the chat. So whenever you're ready to come back and add some thoughts, we'll invite you to do that. So take your moment to think now. I feel like we should have a little music, like the Jeopardy music. Do, 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 do. But I'll let you think in silence. All right, I think we're back and folks are already in the Google Doc. I have to make my screen a little bit bigger here. Oh, fantastic. So as you are sharing some of your thoughts, and you're welcome to share these in chat as well. If you're not comfortable jumping into the Google Doc, go ahead and throw your ideas in chat. But I just wanted to point out, you know, we asked you to go away and brainstorm, and that was something that was a revelation for Andi and I, is that you can actually send people away during a virtual meeting, and they will most likely come back. You can ask them to turn their screens off, take a moment. We actually had a meeting last summer where our meeting leader sent us away for 20 minutes to take a walk and think and brainstorm. And that was actually a really positive thing. And I think it's really good for a meeting, especially in a virtual meeting where folks are sitting and staring at a small screen for a really long time, for all the reasons Andi mentioned about Zoom fatigue, to invite folks to stand up, take a stretch, take a walk. It's like a break, but it's a working break within the meeting. And I feel like folks come back a little bit more energized and ready to attack whatever is the task that you've given them.
I love all the anonymous animals. You got a chipmunk and an otter. And
I always wondered about that. If you can choose your animal. These are great.
yeah.
I'm going to read a few that are showing up in chat. So missing serendipitous conversations and missing so many nonverbal cues. Yeah, right on. I do miss seeing other people and places. I think a lot of us have that same feeling. Casual chatting, not business, but the very important opportunity to know people better. Ability to read body language. Yeah, these are great. Take a couple more minutes and share some of your ideas if there's something that's not already represented here. Sharing food. Yeah, sorry, we can't share virtual food with you. Or can we?
Missing the change of location is really speaking to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to take a moment to just have a conversation about some of these. And I think these are all things that Andi and I have talked about throughout the summer and fall. And, you know, we have some ideas about some of them. Some of them, you know, I don't know if we'll ever be able to replicate within a virtual environment. But I think the casual chatting, you know, we've talked a lot about this, how to replicate that sort of informal relationship building, networking, just seeing old friends and having that moment to catch up in a virtual environment. And we have a couple of ideas that we've tried. One of the things we have started doing is inviting meeting or gathering participants to join the meeting early. So maybe setting aside, you know, that first 5 or 10 minutes before the official meeting starts and invite folks to just show up with their coffee and chat. Another idea that's been floated is to create a breakout room and call it, you know, pre-meeting coffee time. And you can just put people in that room and they can catch up. I think maybe not feeling like you have to stick to your agenda so rigidly that it's okay if a meeting starts 5 or 10 minutes late, especially if it's a group of folks who haven't seen each other in a long time and this is their one chance to say hello, how are your kids, what's going on in your world. I think the tendency in virtual meetings is to start on time, do a lot of business, end on time, and maybe we should relax a little bit about some of that, to allow some of that organic community building, relationship building to happen.
I think there are quite a few things on here too that we can not fully replicate, but alleviate a bit with using video as much as you are comfortable with in your meetings. It does help read the crowd a little bit. It's not perfect, but it's close. And also, I think when you have your video on, you have folks who are less likely to check out. And, you know, I mean, you have your browser open in front of you. It's like the siren song to go over there and check emails and social media. So with the video on, you're a little less likely to do that. It does raise some questions about comfort level with kind of displaying what your home looks like, and those are real. You know, you are the person you can present yourself in real life. You know, something I hadn't thought about that I'm seeing on here is the commute. That drive to a meeting was often nice, and it was a time I would listen to podcasts or something and sort of just check in with my own interests. I'll have a suggestion for that one, but that is really speaking to me as well.
The other thing I wanted to share with respect to sharing food, and something that we experienced as a group at WiLS as part of a staff retreat, and that we've replicated a couple of times this fall, when we're kicking off a new group or a new meeting, to maybe send a little care package that includes a bar of chocolate, some trail mix, you know, some, you know, a packet of coffee or a tea bag, and a little card that says hello, have a snack, just as a way to invite folks to have a very comfortable and friendly experience. I think, I mean, obviously it depends on your budget for your meetings and so on, but just a small token of friendship it goes a long way to try to replicate that, I think.
Yeah, I think breaks are a good idea to think about too in here, that, you know, the Zoom fatigue is real. Back-to-back meetings when they're all online can be taxing. So if you're hosting, just be sure to pepper in breaks. Nobody's like, oh, boo, a break, right? Everybody is always ready for even a 5-minute, just go grab a cup of coffee or a glass of water. So peppering those in whenever it's really manageable is a good idea. Oh, hugs. I also miss hugs. I'll never take hugs for granted again.
Never ever again. So one of the things that Andi and I would like to do with this document after our webinars, we're going to go back through this and kind of curate these ideas and group them in sort of categories and do a little additional brainstorming and share out with you some resources and some ideas that address some of these very specific things that you're missing by not meeting in person.
Am I in the right spot, Vicki? Did you want to add any more about how we replicate?
No, I think we're good. I think some of that I'll talk about when I talk about tips and tricks coming up. There's some ideas in there I think address some of those gaps, but carry on.
That's good. Thanks everybody for throwing your thoughts in there too.
Yeah, really good ideas.
So I just wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about the importance of visuals in a virtual environment. You know, you are speaking at any point to a group of learners who learn differently. So making sure you have visuals that are engaging, not overwhelming. And like these eyeballs actually scared me a little bit, and I thought about not putting them in the slide, but they're also kind of an eye catcher. So they add interest, humor, personality. I think that's one of the things that Vicki and I have noticed a lot. Shifting entirely to virtual meetings, they have become very business, all business. And, you know, seeing what everybody put into the document about what you're missing is actually mostly the things that don't have to do with business. So you have an opportunity to make the environment how you want it to look. You can infuse some of your personality. I mean, I have bobblehead Bob Euchre back here. He's like my guardian angel. He watches over me. You can add Zoom backgrounds, you know, that you have picked out beforehand that both hide your messy kitchen, but also can do things, show your personality, promote your library. You know, they can be all sorts of things. Sometimes Vicki and I will pull out images from Recollection Wisconsin to have, so we'll have like a fancy old timey parlor behind us on our virtual backgrounds. And, you know, you can even use those visuals in your background or in your slides as icebreakers to spark that informal conversation, to get people talking about, you know, what they're thinking about. You can show a video, a silly video, some funny video meme you saw. Just put people at their ease, make it more comfortable, make it a little more informal. But, you know, make sure that your technology matches whatever your aims are for your visuals. So we learned a lot in setting this up, pulling back the curtain again, about the difference between a Zoom meeting and a Zoom webinar. And so do, you know, that pre-work to make sure you have the capabilities to share visuals in the way you want to while your stuff is going on. And then, you know, with all things, you want to engage as many senses as you possibly can with the people who are in your space and who are helping you do what you're trying to do. So, you know, empathy and grace and understanding, always an important component for anything, really, and not just virtual meetings. You're muted, Vicki.
Sorry, I can never get through a meeting without being muted when I'm not supposed to be. So obviously we would be remiss if we didn't leave you with a few of our best practices and tips and tricks that we've discovered throughout the summer and fall, and that we've kind of incorporated into as many of our meetings and gatherings as possible or appropriate. And we'll share these out with you as well after the meeting. But all of these are intended, again, as we've said, to create an inviting and a personalized, if possible, and comfortable meeting experience where you can get work done, but also, you know, reconnect with your colleagues and friends and have a very positive experience. Again, so I can't emphasize enough, I'm a big proponent of the meeting norms, all of the norms. I think the more you can prepare your environment, share expectations with your participants, control as much of that experience as possible to make it smooth and positive experience is a good thing. So determining your meeting norms and sharing them out ahead of time is a great thing. I love creating a waiting room slide now and giving folks something to do while they're waiting, whether it's do a little yoga stretch or a trivia quiz. One thing that's really fun is to take a poll of your meeting participants or your colleagues, find out a fun fact about each of them, and then reconfigure it as a quiz or a trivia question about your colleagues. But give them something to do while they're waiting. I think it's great to start with an icebreaker, even if you are with a group of folks you have known and have been meeting with for a long time. It can be something as simple as we did today. What's your favorite thing about fall? There's a million websites online with fabulous icebreaker questions. It just sets the tone. It, you know, gets people comfortable either, you know, using the tool, whether they're talking or, you know, using chat. It gives them the chance to jump in, play with the technology in a very safe way. Some questions we've always asked: what's your favorite childhood book? We're a bunch of librarians, of course we're going to ask that. What's something you wish you knew how to do? That's fantastic. You find out people's hidden, you know, I wish I was a concert pianist, that sort of thing. If you can, I would suggest avoiding meetings that run over 2 hours. I think that's the limit of folks' attention span and willingness to sit and stare at a computer without a break. That said, I think if you're going to meet more than an hour, you need to build in a break every 50 minutes, you know, a 10-minute break so folks can step away, use the restroom, grab a snack, take a walk, let the dog out, whatever they need to do. So one thing that I am really intrigued by, and I know that this is difficult to incorporate in all of your meetings, but is this idea that this is a curated experience, and that it's not just bringing folks together to hear one person speak for 50 minutes, that you should think about your meeting content or your gathering content in chunks or engagement bursts as they have been called in some of the reading and webinars that I've attended. So an engagement burst is sort of the way you package a piece of content, and you should strive for, an engagement burst every 6 to 10 minutes. And what that means is just changing up the way you present the content. So maybe one engagement burst, you ask folks to answer a question in chat. The next engagement burst, you ask them to answer a question using a Google Doc. The next engagement burst, you have a group discussion or a breakout room. And what that does is give them an opportunity to refocus, to change the way that their brain or their eyes are absorbing the information. I think it's a fantastic way to keep folks engaged. I think there's nothing less exciting than a 60-minute Zoom meeting where one person is simply talking to you the entire meeting. So how you create this engagement burst really depends on what is the content you're delivering. So I suggest you think creatively about how you do that. So I think it's always good to have slides and visuals. As Andi suggested, folks are visual learners. I think it breaks up the heavy text. Another thing that has been presented to us is to speak slower if you can in Zoom and virtual meetings. It's just a better environment. Folks can understand a little more easily. As we demonstrated today, I think it's good to allow for some quiet time for thinking. Let's take 2 minutes to think about a question. It's okay to turn off the video to think. You would do that in an in-person meeting, so you should feel comfortable doing that in a virtual meeting as well. So something that I've tried to incorporate, especially if I'm presenting, if you're feeling fatigued, you should stand up and present. If you've got a setup where you can, maybe a movable desk, or you can park your laptop on a countertop, it really does re-energize you. And I would invite you to try that if you haven't done so already. It's a very different experience than sitting and presenting or engaging in a virtual meeting. Again, I would avoid meetings where you only have folks reporting out. Try to share summary reports with your group prior to the meeting, and then maybe ask folks to come to the meeting with questions. It's going to save you time. And then again, folks aren't going to be listening to a talking head the entire time. Use the built-in tools that are available, the emojis, the thumbs up, the raise hand, the chat. And finally, try to have fun. I mean, allow for the unexpected Zoom bomb from a kid or a pet. Don't despair if the technology doesn't work. You can figure it out. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You might have to reschedule your meeting. But don't stress out too much about the experience.
I want to go back to the quiet time piece. I think response times change a little bit when we go into a virtual meeting, and it could just be our perception of how time passes since you're not able to be reading cues. So if you were in a real meeting, in-person meeting, and you ask the group a question, you would see sort of, thoughts happening and people writing, and you would give them an appropriate amount of time to respond to your question. I feel like in virtual meetings, that time stretches a little bit, and it can be uncomfortable, which is where your meeting norms come in handy, because you can prep people for that discomfort a little bit at the beginning to say, I'm going to ask you questions. We're going to be doing, let's say it's a brainstorming meeting. We're going to be doing brainstorming today. And, I'm going to let the silence go on a little longer than everybody's comfortable with. I think you need to do it in virtual spaces to get people really engaged and participating. Also, I feel like the engagement bursts is really crucial. It doesn't just sort of re-engage people in those moments. It does that, but it also sort of sets the tone that your meeting is interactive, that it's not just people talking at you, that your input feeds the content of what's going on, and the meeting will be better when you participate in it. So I think those are two kind of important things to add on as well.
Agreed.
So I think we have a couple of things to talk about real quickly before we go. First, in chat, what was the most interesting thing today from the presentation? Just spout it out. We're gonna use some of this and the next piece, which is if you have a question and you want to know more about something that we have talked about today, raise your hand. I will push the button that allows you to talk, and you can ask your question or talk about something you want to know more about. This is going to help Vicki and I following this conversation. We want to put together kind of a bibliography of resources for you, but there were so many we've been using that it is not a great idea to send all of them. So we kind of wanted to curate that list a little bit according to what questions you all had. So you can raise your hand or you can throw those things in chat, whatever is most comfortable for you. Engagement bursts, personalizing your background. Yep.
The engagement bursts are really interesting to me. And we tried to do a little bit of that today, as you can guess. But often sometimes, you know, your content may not lend itself to an exciting engagement burst. I mean, it may just be another reporting out, but maybe it's a different person who's reporting out, or maybe they've pre-recorded a video of themselves reporting out. So there's different ways that you can deliver the content, even if it doesn't seem like it's an engagement burst. It really is. Dinner party metaphor. I don't want to poison my guests. That's my no food poisoning.
Vicki's advice for the day.
Pre-meeting chat. Yeah, that was an idea that actually my very groovy young nephew had. He works for a tech company, and he said once a month they have a coffee hour, and it's a big company, and they're all working virtually right now, and they actually sign up in advance to join a breakout room of certain groups of colleagues. It can be a group of strangers, it can be, you know, the folks in the company who all ride bikes, or whatever is the topic, but they do that in advance, and then they go to Friday morning coffee breakout room hour with a predetermined group of friends. I thought that was a really interesting idea. The other thing I'm intrigued by is borrowing ideas from the private sector. You know, companies and organizations that have been doing remote work and virtual work for a long time and have maybe figured out some different ways to engage employees and engage content and present content in this environment.
Somebody had mentioned in the chat earlier that they're using Snapchat with coworkers, which I really like that idea. Although, yeah, the question was how to do that same sort of thing in Zoom is not quite as clear.
I do know one presentation I went to suggested that if you are moderating a panel presentation, to ask your panelists to pre-record their presentation and then have everybody come together for live Q&A, especially if you have multiple panelists and they're joining you from different time zones, and maybe you don't want to worry about controlling all that technology. That kind of minimizes your technology anxiety and still provides a live environment for Q&A, but I thought that was a really cool idea. You just have to make sure they wear the same shirt when they record as when they show up for the live Q&A. If you're worried about that thing. Continuity is important.
Vicki, I don't see any questions, no raised hands.
That is perfectly okay. But there's some great ideas and feedback in the chat.
Also, please feel free to connect with us after the meeting today. Our email addresses are there on the screen. I do want to thank everybody who attended so much for your time and for being patient with us at the beginning. We did record. We'll send out the recording and all the other materials we promised. And with that, please go and have a wonderful rest of your Friday.
Thank you all so much.